meeting of the Bicycle Advisory Committee and the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. As hopefully everyone gathered from the emails that were sent around, the reason that we are doing a joint meeting tonight, and have done a couple of joint meetings in the last year, is primarily because we've got such an exciting speaker lineup today. Yeah, so specifically, we have Allison Bullock, the transportation manager with DES, to talk with us about Route 1. Tonight is the normal PAC night, and so she's able to come to speak to us now. The Bicycle Advisory Committee is also very interested in this topic, so we decided to do another joint session and meet together tonight. So yeah, hope you guys are excited for that conversation and the rest of the updates we have as part of the agenda. I don't have any other further notes as chair, so Cynthia, do you have any notes at the top of the meeting?
No, I think we're good. We're very excited that Allison could be here, and we were eager to take any opportunity, even if it's invading in your turf on a Wednesday. So thank you very much for having us join you.
All right, wonderful. So as is tradition at the PAC meetings, and I assume the BAC meetings as well, is we like to just have some brief introductions, so we all kind of know a little bit of who's in the virtual room, as it were. So since we do have a lot of us on the call tonight, the way we're going to do this is we'll do introductions. I have my people tab on the side of my screen. I'll call 2 at a time. And when you're called, if you could just unmute, say your name, if you have affiliation with either committee, or if just a member of the public or a speaker, just so name, a little bit of why you're here, and then kind of where in Arlington, whereabouts you live, your neighborhood, or what have you. Great, and then we'll move on. All right, let's do this. Okay, I am at the top of my list, so I'll go first, and then we'll have Allison Bullock. So, as mentioned, my name is Lizzie Gallagher. I am the chair of the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and I live in Boston.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Allison Bullock, DES Transportation Planning Manager. And I just want to say thank you to both the BAC and the PAC for having me here tonight for this joint meeting. And I live in Bluemont, here in Arlington.
All right. Next, 2 Chris's. First, Chris Slatt, then Yari.
Good evening. I'm Chris Slatt. I'm a member of the Bicycle Advisory Committee as the Transportation Commission Chair to the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and I live in Penrose, within easy walking distance of the original Bob and Edith Steiner, except no substitutes.
Hello, I'm Chris Yari. I am a member of the PAC. I'm also a member of the Transportation Commission, and I live over here in Boston.
Cynthia, then David.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Palmer. I'm chair of the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and I am near East Falls Church.
I'm David Patton. I'm county staff as a transportation planner, liaison to the Pedestrian Committee. I live in DC, and just one further reminder that we're recording the meeting. So if you want to say something, just be aware of that.
Elwin, then Eric.
Yeah, thanks. Good evening, everybody. My name is Elwin Gonzalez. I'm an associate planner with DES, and I also live in DC.
Eric Goldstein. I'm a member of the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and I live easy walk from Bob and Edith on the other side of it from Chris.
Henry, then Jim.
I'm Henry Dunbar. I'm Director of Active Transportation Operations. I work on the education and encouragement programs for all things walking, biking, Capital Bike Share, and shared mobility. I live in Douglas Park and work in Roslyn.
Jim Feaster, a member of the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I live in Boston.
Kenny, then Leah. All right. Kenny's mic isn't working, but he is a student at Wakefield High School. He lives in Halls Hill. I unfortunately can't see the next line on my screen. But welcome, Kenny. It's really good to have you. Thank you for joining us. If you have any responses or questions, if your mic kind of continues not working this meeting, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll make sure that those questions get asked and answered.
Kenny says he shares a street with a hospital, and I'm here because I'm really interested in the topic.
Wonderful. Us too.
I'm Leah Gerber. I'm also DES staff, a transportation planner, and the Bicycle Advisory Committee liaison. I live in DC.
We have Majdi and then Matthew.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Majdi Shamali. I'm part of the Climate Change, Energy, and Environment Commission, listening in for topics of interest to our commission, and I live in Clarendon Courthouse.
Good evening, everyone. It's Matt Jones with the National Landing Business Improvement District. I live in Brentwood, Maryland.
Noreen, then Pam.
Hi, I'm Noreen Hannigan. I'm on the Bicycle Advisory Committee and also on the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission. And I live in Dominion Hills in Arlington, but I grew up in DC.
Hi, I'm Pam Van Hine. I'm the PAC recording secretary. I live in Aurora Highlands and a few blocks away from Route 1.
Randy, then Raymond.
Hi, I'm Randy Swart. I live in Barcroft. I am probably the last remaining member of the original Bicycle Advisory Committee.
Hi, Raymond Duran. I'm the new program manager at Bike Arlington. I work alongside with Henry Dunbar. It's my third day in. So I'm excited to join and yeah, learn more about the topics we'll be talking today. And I live in the city of Alexandria.
Wonderful. Welcome to the team. Can we have Steve and then Tom?
Hi, I'm Steve Offit. I'm a member of the Bicycle Advisory Committee. I guess I'm the vice chair. I don't do very much. I live in Pentagon City, also a stone's throw from Route 1.
Is that me? Yeah, hi, Tom Corns. I'm a Cherrydale citizen and member of the, actually founding member of the Pedestrian Advisory, ex-Planning Commission, Arts Commission, and now a member of the Langston Boulevard Board, Advisory Board.
All right, and I believe we just had one person earlier in the alphabet join us. Eric Goodman, do you mind wrapping us up with an introduction?
Hi, I'm Eric Goodman, and I'm the vice chair of the Pedestrian Committee, Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and also the a member of the Bicycle Advisory Committee. And I live in the Bluemont area. I'm not sure if that's what you were asking. And then also, Raymond, I wanted to ask you, you worked at Phoenix Bikes before, right?
Yeah, I worked 6 years at Phoenix Bikes.
Yeah, you did a great job.
Thank you.
Board. Thanks.
Thank you.
And I'd like to announce that the PAC has a quorum so we can vote. Thank you, Erics.
All right, so let's move on. Oh, I did notice Jillian just joined the meeting. Welcome, Jillian. We are finishing up introductions. Do you want to briefly introduce yourself before our first topic? You have this moment.
Yes. Sorry, I'm late. I'm Jillian Burgess, member of the Bicycle Advisory Committee and live in Cherrydale, interested in all things safe and sustainable transportation.
Great. All right. Thank you for introductions, everyone. We're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is learning about some protected bike lane quick build projects. So Elwin, take us away.
Sure thing. Thanks, Lizzie. Thanks for having me, guys. Just a reminder, my name is Alan Gonzalez. I'm an associate planner with the DES. I just started this past October, so this has been one of the first projects I've been working on. I'm happy to share with you guys what we've been working on for the past few months. So yeah, just a quick overview. We're basically looking at creating this new framework for upgrading existing bike facilities throughout the county. Through the use of tactical materials that we could easily install. Basically, finding ways to separate and protect people riding bikes from vehicles, not just moving vehicles, but also from parked vehicles. I'm sure a lot of you are aware that a lot of our bike lanes seem to be getting blocked by people parking, or sometimes they're getting blocked by delivery drivers, Uber, Lyft, what have you. So we're looking at ways to find some physical protection that are more than beyond than just the flex post and paint on the ground. But yeah, keep in mind that this is still a work in progress. One of the big reasons why I wanted to speak at this meeting this evening is to get feedback from you guys, to get ideas for how we can fine tune this process and try to identify scoring mechanisms that we haven't looked at yet. And we also want to hear your experiences from riding on the existing protected bike lanes and buffered bike lanes throughout the county. Yeah, next slide. Thanks. Yeah, so overall, this is a new process that we're moving forward with that's been outlined in the Master Transportation Plan, the MTP. Basically, there's been guidance that has been included as part of the overall plan, which you know is requiring us to and recommending solutions to find ways to make existing streets safer by finding solutions and by finding ways to prioritize existing bikeways to make them safer and more comfortable, less stressful for people riding for all ages and abilities. We're also looking for ways to create a better network of low stress routes that connect neighborhoods within residential areas, between commercial centers, transit stations, schools, parks, and county facilities, such as libraries and hospitals.
We've lost the presentation.
Yeah, sorry, 1 second, everyone. I got a scrolling wheel of doom and then it turned off. So let me just get that back up.
Scroll of doom.
Yeah, and then let's see.
Leah, can you make it full screen? That's better. Yes.
Can everyone see?
Yeah,
that's good.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, thanks, Leah. And so this map is showing the existing facilities as they are today. It might be a little hard to see, but these orange lines are existing bike lanes that are, just the traditional painted strips that are usually flanking the travel lanes. The dark blue facilities, dark blue lines are existing protected bike lanes. The light blue are buffered bike lanes that are on the ground today. So as part of this process, we're trying to focus on just enhancing existing buffered bike lanes and the protected bike lanes. So trying to work with what we have to get them on the ground faster, because if we're starting to look at new bikeways, then that'll take much more time to design, and it'll be a much more time-consuming process. Whereas we want to get these on the ground as quickly as possible to address problems that are out there today. Yeah, next slide. So I'm not going to dive too much into detail on these criteria. This is a snapshot from a screenshot from the MTP bike element, basically just outlining how we could score these projects to prioritize which ones come first. Because, in a perfect world, we would do these all together at the same time, the same year. But given the amount of funding that we have, there's only so much we could do. So it's important that we have a way of ranking these projects to have these scoring to determine which ones go first and which ones we could look forward to for the next few months, next few years. And this is just giving you a background as to how we came up with this scoring criteria, which can be shown here in this pie chart. Basically, the idea is we took the criteria that's outlined in the bike element and kind of creating a new way of quantifying them to find ways for these variables that we can measure and we can repeat between different corridors, between different neighborhoods. You know, each neighborhood, each area has their own like context and special situations, but we're trying to find ways to measure things that we could compare and contrast between projects. So we've been using this to basically measure and rank projects based off of our success with the PDSI scoring system, and also with the way our capital projects teams score the upcoming studies to kind of prioritize which ones we should do this year, or maybe put off ones that we could put off for next year or so. Overall, like things that we're looking at are things like connectivity to existing low-stress bikeways, with greater emphasis towards connecting to existing protected bike lanes and to trails. We're also looking at access to schools, parks, libraries, retail clusters that are called out with our partners at CPHD. Also trying to find ways to quantify crash rates per mile, because some of these bike corridors are much longer than others. So some corridors have a higher amount of crashes, but since they are longer segments, they tend to be outweighing shorter segments. So we figured that crash rates per mile is a better way to kind of compare and contrast these to identify key corridors that are probably higher priority. We're also looking at facility conditions such as pavement conditions, with a greater emphasis on corridors with bikeways that have like things like potholes and damaged pavement, to have those be taken a higher priority. Then also we're also looking at ways to include equity in all of our mechanisms to make sure that that we're doing this in a manner that's promoting greater access to destinations, but also giving it higher priority for neighborhoods and census block groups that have air quality issues, particularly with low-income and minority Arlingtonians. Next slide. So basically, this scoring system is basically how we will be evaluating each bikeway, each existing facility. The idea being that we'll do data collection and meet with our partners to see what we have, not just in GIS, but also visiting these sites on the ground in person, getting a better feel for what's on the ground, and also collecting data for crash rates, for air quality, for what have you. And then once we have all the data for each bikeway, then we'll assign scoring along with the weights. Basically with safety, Vision Zero taking the greatest precedent, but also making sure that equity, connectivity to existing facilities, and access to destinations also are weighed heavily as well. And this process is done kind of by segment, because so many of our bike corridors change over the course of the entire length. For example, like Williamsburg Boulevard starts as a traditional bike lane near the Falls Church County line, but then turns to a buffered bike lane, and then turns to a share eventually towards Emerson Street. So the idea is to have these be scored by segment rather than corridor long. And then once we have this, we meet with our partners with engineering staff to see what things could be done fast with just dropping some physical protection in the existing buffered space, for example, or if things might need to be further redesigned, which could take more of a time constraints, which could affect the ranking of each project. And then once we get all that, that's when we will go out into the field and actually build these and install them. And this process will just be continuing over and over again. Yeah, but next slide. So these next few slides are basically just giving examples of things that we're looking at and how we'll be using these to score projects. So for this segment, along North Quincy Street between Washington Boulevard to 10th Street North, which runs parallel with Quincy Park. These are some variables that we're looking at to take a closer look at to see how we could identify problem areas. So as you can see, these are pointing out some deficiencies and some problems that we've heard over the years, not just with like crash statistics, but also pointing out things that we've heard from our transit staff, for example, with people parking in bus lanes. Maybe we could fix that with dedicated bus boarding platforms, similar to this photo in my neighborhood that I just took in Northeast DC. But also identifying reports that we've heard from the community about people blocking the bike lanes, such as this photo that's from our reporting system. And also trying to identify ways we could partner with not just transit, but also with Capital Bike Share, having these amenities and assets being helping score each project for each bikeway corridor. Next slide, please. So further down North Quincy Street, we're also mapping out and trying to track how many crashes there are, not just for bike riders, but also for people walking across the street. And not just tracking the type of crash, but also the year, and trying to crash type in, whether they're like an angle crash or a head-on collision, things like that. Also trying to find ways to support projects that are accessible to parks, such as Mosaic Park here. And then maybe working with solutions with our engineering staff to see what things we could do, such as maybe shifting things around or expanding curb radii to reduce the turning speed of vehicles, for example. Next slide. And then, this segment of Clarendon Boulevard from Washington Boulevard to North Herndon Street, which we've been noticing a lot of crashes through our data collection from over the years, but also not just identifying crash statistics, but also identifying ways we could fix things, not just on the street, but also off street. So you'll see here that there's a lot of opportunities to have to work with our partners at CPHD to maybe find ways to have facilities be off street with continuing with future redevelopment, but also just trying to focus on ways we could do these projects quicker, much faster. Next slide. So I'm going to hand this off to Leah. I believe she wants to take questions and comments, maybe after she's done with her slides.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. Yeah. I can talk really quick and then we can do the questions and comments because I'm sure people have a few. Just wanted to touch base because I know when people had asked about this topic, they'd asked about how, what we're doing to prioritize certain like protected bike lanes and prioritize Vision Zero. We do have a staff member that will come talk more about Vision Zero next time. But we had also had people ask about kind of these precast concrete barrier curbs and other forms of protection in the county besides these, bollards or flex posts. So for those of you who've been in the area, the Crystal City Bike Network, we have installed a cycle track on South Clark from 23rd to 27th. And we have these precast concrete barrier curbs. Generally, they're about 4 inches tall because they needed to be mountable by the fire trucks. But generally, they can be 6 inches tall in all other areas. So these have been installed, and we're working on getting those installed in other parts of the county. And this was a video, but I don't think it's quite working. So if you want to see pictures, let me know, and I'll send it to you. And now I'll go ahead and we can open it up for questions, comments.
I'll just butt in. This is David. I'll just butt in and note that, there's Kenny. Kenny had the first hand up even before Cynthia. So back to you, Ellen.
Sure. Kenny, did you have a question?
Oh, he's having a little technical trouble.
Do you share score results and data with other commissions and planning projects? Yeah, thanks for the question, Kenny. We definitely will once we have all of this data in one place. We've already started having meetings with other divisions, trying to share data information with each other. A lot of our stuff is already in-house, but yeah, we definitely want to have meetings with our partners at CPHD, for example, And I also look forward to having meetings with other jurisdictions as well to see what we could do with maybe partnering on projects on corridors that cross county lines. I guess, Cynthia, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you. Great presentation. Two things. One, I'm very pleased to hear that you're including air quality in your assessment. I think that's so important, and I work in air quality, so thank you very much. And secondly, I'm wondering to what extent quick build is a misnomer, and to what extent that you're looking at intersection safety, which is, of course, where most of the serious injuries and deaths take place. And are you considering like signal changes and no right turn, no left turn, the configuration of intersections that don't always involve building? Sometimes they do. Speed humps before a really scary intersection can absolutely help raised crosswalks, but I'm wondering sort of to what extent you're looking also at things that are not quick build, but that help intersection safety.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Cynthia. Yeah, it's definitely challenging, like with a lot of these intersection issues. A lot of these will require much more significant engineering, especially for these larger intersections, such as the one we just looked at for Washington Boulevard and Clarendon Boulevard. So it's definitely going to, those probably won't fit in with this slot for a quick build. So it might be one of those things that we'll have to address as part of a capital project, because it's not just changing the signal timings, it's not just putting up signage, it's also making sure that we have barriers and things on the ground that discourage like aggressive driving and turning vehicles. I know in my neighborhood in DC, I've seen a lot of things that have been installed with like precast concrete and maybe some rubberized materials that kind of direct drivers to either slow down as they turn, or maybe ways to prevent them from turning left in areas that kind of like corralling vehicles to avoid conflicts. And that's definitely something we want to look at as part of this. And we've been working with our engineering staff to get a better idea for what things we could do now. But for a lot of these bigger intersections that have the highest crash statistics, might need to have some more eyes on that group. Yeah. Did Chris have his hand up next?
Eric Goodman has his hand up next on my screen.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Eric.
Hi. Hi. This is Eric. I just wanted to say at first, I think this is great. I think it's really important to evaluate this and build out these safety features. The one thing that I guess I have a little concern about is with any separation from traffic, when you get to intersections or cross intersections, it's really important to make certain that you can transition back into traffic or across intersections. So that really, that engineering, even those quick builds, really needs to be taken into account. And then on top of that is visibility as well. Certainly, you don't want to compromise visibility with any of the barriers that you put in. So it sounds like these are pretty low barriers, so probably won't, but it's important that we don't have any compromise when you're, again, transitioning from the separated path through an intersection. But really appreciate the work. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And that's definitely something to keep in mind with this Quincy Street example. If we do move forward with the cycle track, for example, some of the segments, especially at the bookends, might have to transition to, the traditional flanked bike lanes on both sides of the street, and those get, complicated. I'm sure everyone knows on this call. As someone who bikes as well, I really get nervous crossing those transitions, especially like if it's an on-site location. So that's definitely something that we need to keep in mind as we do this.
I think Jillian had her hand up next.
Yeah. Sorry, the complicated devices today, but thank you very much. I wanted to echo Eric's positive comments. This is an awesome, awesome program. I cannot tell you how excited I am to hear this. When you started talking, I was like, oh my God, this is great. I need to tweet about it, about how great it is. And to that end, Leah, if you don't mind going back to slide 2 just for a second, I would really appreciate it. But so all of this is great. I think it's great not only for the safety of people that bike, but often I hear from drivers like, I don't know what to do around bike lanes. I don't know what, how to act around this stuff. But when it's clearly separated, I know I'm not supposed to be there. And so I think it will help drivers. And of course, when people on bikes don't feel comfortable in the street, they're on the sidewalk, and no one actually wants to bike on the sidewalk, and the people walking don't want people to bike on the sidewalk. So it's definitely better for people using the sidewalk. So I think this is a great improvement that actually will help like all users. So thank you very much for that. As far as design standards, I just hope, I say this often, but I hope that the design standards you're using will work for all types of bikes. And generally, if you design it so that it works for bikes with long wheelbases or bikes pulling trailers, and if it works for kids on bikes, then it works for everybody else too. So hopefully your design vehicle will be a long tail or a bike with a trailer, and the sort of person you're thinking of in making things safe will be a kid. And then finally, to that end, when we're talking about prioritization criteria, if we prioritize schools, one, we cover the whole county because honestly, schools are all over the county. 2, schools are activity centers for a lot more than just kids going to school. But 3, kids are going to school. They're going to school every day. We know that kids who go to school in an active manner, so walk or bike to school, that they learn better. We know it's better for air quality at schools. We know it's better for safety at schools. And it's better for air quality and safety throughout the county. So appreciate you thinking about destinations generally, but I hope that schools can be sort of up there in the prioritization of the destinations. Oh, and then finally, if we could make it safer to walk and bike to schools, we could actually save the county writ large money, because it's the county's money that funds those school buses, including the school buses that take like the high school kids to the career center in the middle of the day. If they could bike, we could save some money. Leah, I'm sorry, could you go one slide back? The other way. Yes, that one. Thank you so much. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the comments, Jillian. I'm happy that you brought up the bikes with large wheelbases that are long-tailed that have trailers attached to them. That was definitely something that wasn't on our mind at the time that we started putting these scoring together, but it makes a whole lot of sense because one of our scoring variables is basically getting an idea of the existing widths of bike lanes that are on the ground today. So, bike lanes that are substandard that have like much narrower widths, or maybe if they're cleaning the gutter pans, maybe those should be widened. Maybe that width should come from like the travel lanes or somewhere else. So basically the idea is like the narrower the bike lane is today, the higher it'll be scored to see what we could do to fix it, to make it more comfortable for everyone, including folks carrying kids in tow. And I'm happy you brought up the school prioritization for the whole county, because that's definitely something that was on our mind. And when I did like a buffer analysis in GIS, it, like you said, it covered the whole county. So we basically broke it down not just by elementary school, but also by middle school and high school. So corridors that have, 2 schools, like a middle school and a high school, would kind of be like double dips, I guess you could say. So they have like multiple scorings instead of having just one score for all schools. You know what I mean?
That's great. And I'm sorry, I did have one more question. Are you guys also considering flex posts on the line like we see in Clarendon, in parts of Clarendon and parts of Crystal City?
We haven't gone that far, that deep in the details. I'm personally not a fan of that because that's just if it's on the line, it's just like a paint. To me, it's kind of like a painted buffer, and it works best in constrained settings. But obviously, the buffer, I think the standard is like 3 feet per NACDO. So if we're using flex posts, then they work best for like a 3-foot buffer. If it's anything narrower than that, then that's kind of, we have to find ways to maybe re-engineer the street, or because if we can't do it right, then we should maybe put that project off for later.
Yeah, I think that you'll find the use case is actually different, that those of us who have seen it in practice prefer the flex post, because the flex post on the line, well, that's not the ideal, and we would love to have hardened protection with the full 3-foot buffer. If we cannot have that, we rather have a flex post on the line. I rather have a flex post on the line, in part because it keeps cars out of the bike lane. Most drivers don't want to hit flex posts and don't. So I hope you will consider that and not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and put up those flex posts where you can.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Want to kind of echo what Eric and Jillian said. This is fantastic to see. And then my question is, have we finally, do you feel like we finally gotten to where we have like a gold standard or kind of a prototypical low stress bike lane that we're shooting for all of these upgrades, and adjusting down as necessary to fit site conditions? Is the concrete form kind of what we're going with going forward, or are we still in this sort of bespoke, coming up with it as we go along, project by project sort of paradigm that we've been in for a long time?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Chris. Ideally, like every bike lane would be protected with concrete or some kind of physical protection. I'm always envious of other communities that have like things like trees, or like some actual like beautiful public art that separates cars from bike lanes. In a perfect world, all bike lanes would be like off street and raised, like similar to how they are in the Netherlands, for example. But each corridor is definitely going to have to be taken into context on a case by case basis. So the precast concrete things that we're starting to see throughout the region, not just in DC, but also Montgomery County, where I used to work, that seems to be the upcoming industry standard. And a lot of our guidelines are coming from NACDO and other communities such as Cambridge and Massachusetts. So yeah, I want to say yes, that the concrete is going to be the standard, but it's going to be tough, and we might have to find alternative ways to have some kind of other separation, such as some kind of other raised facility to basically discourage people from entering the bike lanes in their vehicles.
Thanks. I think Henry's hand is up next.
Yeah, thank you. My question is about the collection of the blocked bike lane data. And I noticed on your slide around Quincy Street at Mosaic Park, there was a picture of a truck, and it said it was a queue alert, and there was a number on it. I know in the reporter problem we've got blocked bike lanes in there, but it seems the language is around, the MOTs and construction sites, and then the other option is report a transportation/safety investigation that you're triggering. I'm just wondering, is this something we want to encourage people to do? Because I get asked about this frequently, including just this last week. And I know that the Clarendon Boulevard, the brand new protected bike lane there, which I love, the Starbucks across from the Whole Foods is blocked more often than not. So how can we start collecting some data to sort of get this on the priority list of needing some, additional protection, some hardening of that kind of thing? And this is something we want to encourage riders to do. For the
Yeah, it's-
standard, just car blocking the lane, not construction, not, an investigation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. This is something that I admit we struggled a little bit with because there's so many options when you try to report a problem. Some people tend to classify them incorrectly, or they put them in a category that maybe they made a mistake or something. And we could do a better job of finding a way to report blocked bike lanes beyond just blocked travel lanes or blocked sidewalks. So for this analysis, we were able to maybe basically like query our own data from everything that people reported, basically just any kind of mention of blocked bike lanes, blocked bicycle lanes, blocked cycle tracks, what have you. And there's a whole like archive of data going back for the past few years. So it was a little time consuming to find every mention of a blocked bike lane, but we've been able to kind of put them all together into one database. So yeah, and I agree. This might be something that we could talk offline to see how we can improve our own reporting system. But yeah, to echo your question, this is something that we definitely wanted to incorporate all together.
So yes, please, and happy to work with you on that. So thank you.
All right, given our timing, Eric, I'm actually going to have Kenny be our last question. So Kenny, would you, if your mic is working?
I believe my mic is working.
Okay, excellent.
Cool. So my last question is really more of a response to something someone else has said about the kids and getting to the Career Center, because I don't have a first period, so I always hear from the Career Center people that come back from that, as well as I used to go to the Career Center and know that the bus was always late, which is why they changed the schedule for the schools. A bike lane around that would be nice, because I know plenty of people actually walk to the store before getting on the bus just because it leaves so late compared to when it's supposed to. I guess my question is, how are you going to get people to know that there is a new bike lane or protected bike lane there that don't already use one?
Could you ask that question in a different way?
Sure. How are people going to know they can change their route to a bike?
Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure if you've taken a look at our bike element. A big component of it is to kind of encourage folks to think about biking instead. And obviously, infrastructure plays a huge role, but there's also a lot of not just changing infrastructure, but also changing perceptions about how we use public space. A lot of folks may feel uncomfortable biking in any kind of bike lane, and sometimes they might feel more comfortable biking on a trail or on a sidewalk. So a lot of it is raising community awareness and teaching each other, teaching ourselves how we can get around our community by bike. And in a perfect world, every bike facility would have that raised concrete protected separation that's not just physically protected, but has a large width away from moving traffic. And we'll definitely take a look at the facilities and see what could be done around the Career Center. But it's just a matter of figuring out how much space we have to play around with, and getting a better idea for how we can encourage and motivate people to give bike riding a chance.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I do see that we have a few more questions, but I do think it would be prudent to kind of cut them off. Sorry for those who are in line. I think we all have Leah's email. I imagine that you could send questions to her afterwards, or Ellen might share his email, and you could follow up that way if you're still curious. But thank you everyone, and thank you Ellen for joining us and sharing on this exciting project. All right, wonderful. So looking at our agenda, I'm going to propose that we swap a few things around just in case we go over a little bit. And so let's actually, Allison, if you're ready, I'm going to tap you a little bit earlier, if we could have the Route 1 discussion now, because it has an external dependency, which is you. And thank you.
Sure. Lizzie?
Yes.
There may be people who sign on at 8 o'clock because Ellison was promoted for 8 o'clock. So they may miss some of her presentation.
Okay,
that's a great idea.
Okay, that's a great point, ma'am. Okay,
Lizzie,
so
I think David and I could give our announcements like super quick in the next 10 minutes, and then we could go to Allison, and then we could do priorities at the end.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
If that
Let's
works.
do that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's see. I think, let me just pull this up. David and I had just been asked like about a few upcoming engagements. I think we can talk a little bit about the Mount Vernon Trail. That's upcoming. They had a meeting in December. One thing though, when I asked our communications team, what engagement is coming up, to really once again make a plug for this Engage page. I know a lot of you have seen this already, but there's probably those of you that have not. You can see here there's current engagement opportunities. A few that are important for this group. You can see we have the Arlington Boulevard Trail Improvements Feedbacks Form, and that is through today, so there's still time to share feedback on that. That is a transportation planning project to improve a portion of the Arlington Boulevard Trail. We'll also be talking about the next item today, the FY 2024 Budget Engagement Feedback Form, and that is open through January 17th. And then also happens to be third on the list is another thing that's relevant for this group, which is the George Washington Memorial Parkway and Mount Vernon Trail public comment, and that is through January 18th. So generally you can come to this page whenever you need to see, what engagement opportunities there are. I know there's a lot of people in this group that take a lot of time to do these engagements, which we really appreciate. So hopefully this can kind of be a hub for those of you who maybe want to get involved. And then at the same time, you can see there's these get involved links, and the communications team also wanted to plug that you can join a civic association, get involved with a community organization. There's also a way to sign up for a newsletter, which I'm assuming a lot of you already are, but there is this second page here. And I'll put both of these in the chat. They're already in the meeting agenda. So you can sign up for newsletters, whether that's, an Arlington alert or Bike Arlington, just to kind of keep everything in, similar spaces. That is what the Cape team wanted us to talk about. David, do we want to talk about Mount Vernon Trail? Also, is Jillian's hand up?
Yeah.
This.
Looking back on that list of newsletters that you just had up, I know there are some other newsletters, like there's the region specific transportation updates. I know because I'm on them, but and I realize sometimes you have project specific newsletters, and those might not warrant being on that page, but it might be worth putting up the Columbia Pike one and the Crystal City one, stuff like that.
Yeah, I'll mention that. That's helpful. I think the system right now is if you sign up for your advisory, your ANC, then you get those newsletters. But people who don't live on Columbia Pike may be interested in getting the information. So I'll let the Cape team know. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, and please pass along our appreciation. This is one of the things that we've talked about here is making it easier to find the engagement opportunities at one glance, and you guys did it, and it's great, and thank you.
Yeah, I'll pass that along. I think there was a request just to kind of touch on the Mount Vernon Trail project.
I don't have much to add. I don't know when the next engagement opportunity is. There was one in December, and that's the last one that's posted on their project website. So if somebody has an update to that, I'd be happy to know about it. This is the idea of improving the Mount Vernon Trail all the way through Arlington and Alexandria. It's a big project.
Yeah, I think someone in the chat said they extended the deadline. So there's a deadline for comments until January 18th.
All right. So gosh, I can find the the Park Service's website and pop that link into this chat. How about that?
That sounds good. And this is just kind of a broad overview. They had a public meeting, like David had mentioned. This is a general timeline. You can see the public scoping meeting that was held on December 6th. And now, really January through April, they're going to be kind of working on this document affected environment, determining environmental consequences and developing mitigation measures. And this is all part of the NEPA process. So it looks like if they're preparing the environmental assessment through May, it looks like there'll be public review and comments on the environmental assessment sometime between May and June 2023. So I'm guessing that's when the next public engagement will be. There could be something sooner, but definitely something in the spring/summer of this year. Now that are very fast announcements, and we'll put all of the links in the chat. Oh, David, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I still do that after 3 years. Leah, you're so good at this. I found the Mount Vernon Trail thing. I'm going to pop that link into the chat for this meeting so folks can find that and maybe archive that. Oh, that's not it. Go.
Oh, nice. And Chris Slatt put the SESMO alert in the chat as well for the Mount Vernon Trail, which is a great resource. And Pam has the hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to encourage everybody to, today, make sure you respond to the Arlington Boulevard one, and B, do respond to the George Washington Parkway Mount Vernon Trail. And I did attend the virtual meeting for that, and they are looking for all kinds of comments. So any suggestions you have for improvements, now is the time to do it for the entire trail and for a good chunk of the parkway as well. I mean, they're proposing some very interesting things, and it's really important to get it right. And I strongly encourage people to check out Chris Slatt's SESMO listings, both for Arlington Boulevard and for the Mount Vernon Trail. He has some great suggestions there, and he's got links to everything. Engage Arlington also has the links that you actually need. And my suggestion for Arlington Boulevard, open up 2 of the online engagements. Use one that is just the map to put your comments, and use the other one to actually look at Google Earth and actually look at the site. Because looking at the map, you can't tell what's wrong, but you actually have to look at it. And if you're like me and really aren't familiar with this site, it's really useful to be able to do that. But you can't really go back and forth on one system. You've got to have 2 things open and do it, but that works fine. So thank you.
Pam, since you attended the Mount Vernon Trail meeting, I was under the assumption that this was only like tied to the widening that they got budget for in Arlington County.
No.
You're saying they're more interested, or this is more broad?
They have said they'll take comments on everything. Widening is a part of it, and it's tied into the existing both the trail guidelines and the parkway guidelines that they came out with a couple of years ago. And I think it was the last page of the trail guideline that actually shows what the current trail widths are at certain places along the trail, which is really helpful when you're trying to recommend specific widths. But yeah, at the meeting, several people said, well, can we talk about this, talk about that? And they said, yeah, if there are places where there's stormwater everywhere, talk about it. Are there dangerous curves? Talk about it. Are there dangerous intersections? Talk about it. This is a time to raise all kinds of issues. They said they might not get addressed with what they're doing now, but they'll put it in the hopper for the future. They really want a very broad response from people, and I hope we give it to them. What I haven't actually sent in a response, so it's one of those fixed boxes, and I don't know what the limit is on characters, or whether you have to like put in a link to a URL for the rest of your comments or not. That I don't know. I haven't tried it, but yeah, it's a really important project for us to participate in.
Well, I can't find the thing I was looking for, but I'll just comment that I had some early input to the trail project, not the roadway project, the trail project several months ago, the project planners were going sort of inch by inch of the Mount Vernon Trail through Arlington County and flagging those things that Pam just mentioned, the pinch points and the drainage issues. And a lot of their planning is about stormwater and overall widening and upgrading. And to pull this project off, they're going to have to close significant sections of the trail for significant lengths of time. So they were looking for all the places where the Mount Vernon Trail connects or could be made to intersect with other surface facilities in the county. So look for, maybe during this process that's going on, their plans for detours. And I know this is an important subject for both the bike and the PED committees, the MOTs. The MOTs are going to be really important. These are long stretches of trail that don't have intersections for significant distances. So we're going to see bike and PED traffic diverted onto Arlington streets. So be paying special attention to their MOT plans. About some of this stuff. Oh.
All right. I think we may be sufficiently close to 8 o'clock for Allison to get ready.
Hi, Jay. Yeah, there may be a few more people who join in, but yeah, this is good.
You want me to give it 1 minute before I start, or should I just go ahead and jump in?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Well, who knows Allison well enough to introduce her properly? We can use 1 minute on that.
Oh, I'll jump into the fray here. So Allison is my boss. She's the greatest thing ever. Allison and Leah Gerber and Elwyn Gonzalez, who you met a little while ago, are all in the transportation planning section in Division of Transportation. And we are half of a bureau that has an intimidating name called Transportation Planning and Capital Projects Management. So we, on paper, have the planning function, and our colleagues in project management have the project management function, and we bridge back and forth, work closely together. And Allison joined the county, I'm not going to say when, a couple of years ago.
2 years ago.
2 years ago, as a project manager. And then the opening for our section chief opened up, and she applied for that and has slotted right in. And we are a group of, I think, 7 people now. And it's going pretty well. So with that, Allison Bullock.
All right, thanks, David. Yeah, and thank you all for having me here tonight. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about Route 1 over the past couple years, but especially recently with VDOT's most recent public information meeting, followed by Dan Reinhardt and team coming to the December BAC PAC meeting. And then most recently via the county manager, we received your joint letter commenting on what Dan had presented most recently, but then also kind of remaining items and questions. And so we received that via the county manager. And I believe when he responded with his letter, that he included our staff comments. And so I think there were some questions about what our role has been in this process and how we work with VDOT and kind of what our thinking has been around this project so far. So I'm here tonight to go through that and kind of describe to you our role as county staff and how we've been interfacing with VDOT. And I'll give a summary of what our comments included to VDOT and kind of where we are with those. So I think Leah is going to share some slides for me. And then we'll jump in here. Okay. So the comments, the long form comments that recently went to VDOT from staff, it was about an 11-page document. with a letter from our director at the time, Dennis Leach. I guess he's still our director until Friday. Dennis is retiring. I'm sure you all have heard his last day is on Friday. But our comments kind of began with a series of conversations prior to the summer, but really kind of kicking off with the summer streetscape proposals that VDOT shared in their second public information meeting. And we were continuing conversations with VDOT about what our standards are in terms of lane widths, sidewalk widths, bike facilities, but really what we needed to do was kind of take a step back and provide some holistic guidance to them based on our adopted plans and policies and standards. When they presented streetscape options over the summer, they presented those 4 options that you probably remember that kind of looked at the space behind the curb. And I think they all included 23.5 feet of space kind of uniformly behind the curb and different ways to mix and match that. And as we were kind of talking through those as staff, we really wanted to kind of look holistically at the corridor. We didn't feel like we could make any recommendations about streetscape kind of in a vacuum. So what we did is we kind of did a comprehensive look over all of our plans, policies, and standards that apply to the Route 1 corridor. So that included the sector plan and the corresponding multimodal transportation study, the MTP elements, the Vision Zero action plan, and more recently, the Crystal City Bike Network recommendations. And so we packaged these as a list of recommendations to VDOT by topic to inform the ongoing study and development of the at-grade corridor alternative. And this is really what our role is as county staff in Route 1 and any kind of state project or project led by an external partner is to provide guidance, to review at each phase of the process, starting from scoping to planning to design to implementation. And first and foremost, we're reviewing for consistency with adopted plans and policies. So as staff, that's the interest we're representing. We're representing the county's, publicized, on the books guidance, essentially, as well as our county standards, which differ in certain cases from VDOT's, but that we think on an at-grade corridor like Route 1 that county standards are appropriate to look at here. Next slide. So, can you go one back, Leah? I think there was a cross-section slide. Yeah, thank you. So our first step was taking a look at the entire cross-section and right-of-way. And so the most direct guidance to the corridor is the Crystal City Sector Plan. And so we were looking at that for, the overall vision that was provided for Route 1 in that document. The Crystal City Sector Plan envisioned that Route 1 would remain partially elevated. And, what's being proposed now and studied is the fully at-grade corridor from 12th to 23rd kind of comes down to grade between 12th and 15th. And so that is different, but the overall vision for the corridor as a grand tree-lined urban boulevard remains the same. And the intention is for it to be a boulevard that kind of stitches back together the two sides of Crystal City and removes that barrier, down the middle. And so our recommendation was that VDOT follow the Crystal City Sector Plan right-of-way guidance, which has 140 feet of right-of-way between 23rd and 18th. A lot of that is constrained based on adjacent private parcels. And that's a portion that is basically already at grade. But then north of 18th, we recommended that the recommendations from the sector plan be followed and allow up to 160 feet of right-of-way to accomplish the minimum streetscape recommendations that I'll go through in a second. And initially, the sector plan had recommended up to 160 feet in this section in order to accommodate inboard ramps, since the highway was going to remain elevated in that section. And so even though ramps are no longer necessary, in looking at this as staff, we thought that the ramps were basically providing mobility along the corridor. And so even though the mobility needs are changing based on the corridor coming to at grade, that it was still important to preserve that additional space for mobility needs and for transportation. And this is where we kind of differed from what VDOT recommended, where they were looking at a consistent 140-foot right-of-way through the entire corridor. So that's the one place where we differed from their recommendation here. Next slide. Okay, and so then another overarching recommendation we had was to apply a design speed that matched the nature of this corridor and the character that's intended by it becoming this, grand urban boulevard that stitches the neighborhood back together. So we recommended that they pursue design speed of 25 miles per hour. VDOT has moved forward with that. And so that's a place where we agree, and we were very happy to see that they were pursuing a design speed of 25. But in pursuing a design speed of 25, we want to make sure, and what we reiterated in our comments is that it's really important that all of the street design elements align to reinforce that target speed. So it's not sufficient, for say just the travel lane widths to be narrowed, or for the signal timing of the lights to be synchronized. Like there are so many different elements that need to come together to support reinforcing and kind of creating a self-enforcing design for that 25 miles per hour. So that was another piece that we applied from the Vision Zero action plan, that mentality that really reducing speeds reduces crash risk, it reduces the risk of severe crashes, and it's something we wanted to see applied to this project. So then going into individual elements, we looked at travel lane widths. VDOT was recommending 11-foot travel lanes throughout for both turn lanes and standard through travel lanes. We've asked them to reconsider and apply travel widths that are consistent with our county standards. And we do use 11-foot for outside lanes and for turn lanes to allow for larger vehicles, particularly transit. But for inside lanes, we found that 10 feet is more than appropriate. And especially on a corridor with a lower speed limit, like 25 miles per hour, that should be sufficient. The other place where we differed was that VDOT considers the gutter pan width, the little strip of concrete adjacent to the curb. They consider that outside of the travel lane width, which sounds like a small thing, but it actually ends up making up a few feet when you consider both sides of the street. And so our standard is to include gutter pan width within the travel lane width. And so we've asked them to do the same. Next slide. So then looking at the pedestrian realm, which is, I'm really calling most of the space kind of behind the curb. We looked at the recommendations in the sector plan, and we also looked at our different arterial types that are outlined in the MTP and how the nature of Route 1 is changing. So currently, Route 1 is defined as a type F arterial, which is a really jargony way of just saying that it's an arterial that was intended to accommodate medium to low density. And it's a type of arterial that generally has a higher travel speed. It tends to have narrower sidewalks. It's not really creating like that hospitable multimodal environment. But with Route 1 being proposed to come to grade, the higher densities in Crystal City, the development that's happening, especially with it being mixed use, that we looked at our different arterial types, and a type B arterial, which is for high density mixed use, is more appropriate. And so we looked at our guidelines for that. And so following those, we looked at the 140-foot right-of-way section south of 18th and the 160-foot right-of-way section north of 18th, and applied some sidewalk minimums. So for south of 18th, we've asked VDOT to apply an absolute minimum of a 10-foot wide sidewalk, which would include an 8-foot clear zone and a 2-foot shy zone. The shy zone being for door swing of adjacent developments and kind of just shy space along the building frontage. North of 18th, where we have that more substantial right-of-way to work with, we've recommended a minimum of 14 feet, which gives us a 12-foot clear zone with the 2-foot shy zone. And this is enough space basically for people in pairs walking side by side to pass one another without having to yield. So it's a very comfortable, kind of generous amount of space to provide. We also recommended specific design considerations around the pedestrian realm, things like continuing sidewalks across existing driveways so that you have a continuous strip of concrete rather than the asphalt of the driveway breaking up the sidewalk. That's something we do regularly in the county, is to have the continuous sidewalks, reducing the corner radii at intersections to help slow down traffic and to make the crossing a little bit shorter. Widening crosswalks. I believe they had 10-foot crosswalks applied throughout the whole design, the whole concept design. And we asked them to widen those to match the approach width of the sidewalk. So in these places where you say you have a 14-foot wide sidewalk, provide a 14-foot wide crosswalk so that people aren't being effectively squeezed into a narrower space as they cross the street. You want to have kind of that consistent experience. And then to provide rounded median noses at intersections. So if you recall from the concept that Dan walked through at the intersections, a lot of the median tips are kind of pinched to allow for vehicle turns. But with this having multiple lanes in both directions, we don't think it's necessary to pinch those. It'll provide a more comfortable pedestrian refuge at the crossings to provide a rounded median nose. It provides effectively a bigger waiting space. So we think that in general, they should apply the rounded median noses. Next slide. Okay, and then for bicycle and scooter safety and access. So in reviewing the plans, as I'm sure you're all aware, our plans do not explicitly call for a bike facility along Route 1. And that's kind of to be expected since at the time, Route 1 was envisioned to remain a partially elevated highway. So we were looking through, our various policies to provide guidance to VDOT. And, what we've really pointed them to is that providing an enhanced bike facility is consistent with our bike policies out of our MTP bike element. It's consistent with our complete streets policy and the streets element to provide safe and comfortable facilities for all modes and to pursue the most robust bike treatment that we can on a corridor. It's also consistent with the sector plan vision to unite Crystal City. If we have this gap in bike facilities where we're otherwise having a robust bike network throughout Crystal City, that's going to be noticeable. It's going to affect people's desire to bike or their ability to bike to their final destination. So this will enable local bike and scooter access along those blocks of Route 1. So we're recommending a minimum 6-foot one-way cycle track on each side of Route 1, 6 feet being kind of the minimum comfortable operating space for a cycle track. And then we also recommended that they apply protected intersection treatments at all of the at-grade intersections, given that we also have bike facilities that are crossing. So we're going to have, intersecting cycle tracks on Route 1, intersecting with bike facilities on the cross streets. So we think providing protected intersection treatments will provide a much more comfortable experience as cyclists are crossing Route 1 or traversing it. And along with that, providing things like the hatch screen markings at conflict points, which has become a county standard, doing that through intersections, doing that across driveways, so that any place where there is a potential conflict, it's more clear to both cyclists that they're entering that conflict space and, of course, to drivers to be more aware that there is a bicycle right-of-way essentially crossing where they are looking to turn. Next slide. Okay, curbside uses and curb management. So we agreed with VDOT VDOT's, they're finding from the last PIM that outside of the peak hours that they would be able to accommodate on-street, off-peak parking. Specifically, we think this should be oriented towards pickup and drop-off, so those very quick trips, as well as short-term parking, but again, oriented towards encouraging high turnover, encouraging people to use that space as they need to, but that it's not intended for someone parking their car and staying there all day. And this would be in the outermost lane of Route 1 in both directions. And we think that provides a lot of additional benefits. For one thing, a lot of that activity as redevelopment is occurring along Route 1 and there are more frontages along Route 1, there's going to be a desire for people to pick up and drop off along Route 1. We're also planning for a lot of curb space on the side streets to be used for other modes and needs, for protected bike lanes, for other uses, and we think that this would, help alleviate some of the pressures on those side streets. It'll also have a traffic calming benefit. So by having the off-peak parking, we'll effectively have 2 lanes in each direction on Route 1 in the off-peak. So it'll be that can also help to slow traffic down. It can help as you're waiting to cross the street for it to feel like a shorter crossing, fewer lanes of moving traffic that you have to look for and cross. And then in the longer term, we've asked VDOT to monitor traffic volumes and seek opportunities to make that outermost lane permanently used for a variety of flexible curbside uses. So not just pick up and drop off and short-term parking, but then with it being permanent, it opens up the opportunity for things that are fixed to be placed in that outermost lane, such as bike share, parklets, scooter parking, things of that nature. And so that's something that we wanted to note for the future. And a lot of this comes back to travel demand management, which I know was a big question that came up when Dan Reinhardt and team were here. We do believe that a robust set of TDM strategies is needed for this corridor. I know that Dan and team presented the reduction in traffic volumes that we have seen since the start of the pandemic. And while we as staff think that that is promising, we don't think that there's any guarantee that that's going to hold. And if anything, we want to continue to see further vehicle volume reductions along Route 1. And we think that that's appropriate for this kind of corridor that, with less volume and the lower traffic speed, we're just going to have a safer and more comfortable environment for everybody. So having a regional TDM program that goes beyond the borders of Arlington and really considers those trips that are starting outside of the county, traveling through the county on Route 1 is going to be really important to the success of this corridor. Next slide. Okay, so this is kind of putting everything I just went through in text form, putting it all together into a graphic. So these are the cross-section graphics that we included in our comments to VDOT. So kind of just, I guess, starting from the left side. So we're looking at 23rd to 18th Street, so the southern half of the corridor within the portion of 140-foot right-of-way. So you can see the 10-foot sidewalks on either side of the street. We have the cycle track on each side marked as 7 so that we can account for the 6-foot cycle track, but then also account for 1 foot of buffer between the walking and what we're calling the rolling space to provide that little bit of separation. And then we have the 10-foot inside travel lanes, the 11-foot outside lanes, and then for the landscape zones and the soil panels for trees, we've been working closely with our urban forestry group on what would be most appropriate here. And because there is an intention to provide large street trees and have this be a tree-lined urban boulevard, their recommendation was that we need 8 feet minimum of planting width to provide those larger trees and so that they can actually grow into shade trees and something that really fits the scale of this corridor. And then the median is also a little bit more robust than what VDOT was recommending, and we're able to achieve that because of also the narrower travel lanes that I mentioned earlier. So for that, we're recommending it says 13, and you can see below 12-foot planting width, and then the 13 comes from then the 6-inch curb on either side, and 12 feet allows us to get a double row of trees. And so that was another kind of aesthetic part of creating more of a grand boulevard feel, is to have enough space that you would have kind of these 2 rows of trees that overlap the travel lanes in each direction. All of that helps to kind of make the corridor feel more inviting, both, as pedestrians and cyclists, but then also adds to that feeling of enclosure that can also be a traffic calming benefit. So all of this comes back to how can we incorporate elements that reinforce that 25-mile-an-hour design speed. Next slide. Okay, and then this is a similar thing showing the section north of 18th up to the 160-foot right-of-way. And so it's very similar to what you just saw. We've actually recommended that basically from curb to curb, from the leftmost vehicle travel lane on the screen to the rightmost vehicle travel lane on the screen, that space remain at 87 feet along the whole corridor, so that in this section where we have 160 feet, all the additional space is going to the streetscape. So it will feel, as a driver along this corridor, more consistent. And any additional space then would be going to that more generous walking space, which also provides a little bit more space for cyclists, because you won't have, as constrained of a walking plus rolling space, and then a little bit more width to the landscape zones along both curbs, so that we can get a double row of trees in those areas as well. And so I think that's the last slide. I know that there were a few other questions related to gateways and kind of the approach speeds kind of coming into the study corridor from both directions. That's something that we did include some comments on in our comments letter, but we're continuing to talk with VDOT about that, especially from the north side with the I-395 110 interchange improvements. That is a totally separate project, but it of course has a huge impact on this study area. And so some of the questions we have for VDOT are, what other design features can we add to create these distinct visual cues that will reduce speeds? What impact will adding the signals that they're proposing at the off-ramps have on this this portion of the corridor? Because ideally it will help to slow people down and get them into a different mindset a little bit earlier, before they're reaching, say, 12th Street coming southbound. We're also continuing to talk with them about the cross street approaches. And so now that we have kind of our set of comments on Route 1 itself, our plan is to continue to work with them on what the design of the cross streets will look like and how those will interface with Route 1 at the intersections, particularly 18th Street. I know there's been a lot of interest from the BAC, PAC, and others about what is 18th Street going to look like. And we are interested in working with VDOT to see if we could continue the cross-section that was recommended in the Crystal City Bike Network east of Bell, which has 3 travel lanes and a combination of buffered and protected bike lanes. If that could be continued west across Route 1, and basically, continue the enhanced bike facilities. So those are all questions that we have for VDOT that we've posed to them, and they are working on some additional analysis and sketching up what some of those ideas would look like. And then I know another one that you had questions about was the all ped phase, and how that's going to work, and a concern about the overall cycle length. And this is something we've asked them to do a little bit more analysis on too, and to really demonstrate to us how this is going to work with the adjacent intersections and with the signal timing progression. So we're still waiting to hear back on that, but that's an ongoing conversation too. And with the all-ped phase, one thing we're considering as staff is we're interested in seeing how this will work. I think we do have some reservations about an all-ped phase, just because of the trade-off between providing sufficient pedestrian crossing time and the amount of time that you need in order to get people across and meet the minimum crossing time, and how that affects the overall cycle length. The more pedestrian crossing time that is needed, the longer that overall cycle length is going to be. And so there's a little bit of a tension there. And so that's one thing that we just want to understand better and have VDOT dig into, is how that is going to work for people, because it does become a very long time to wait. So there's more to come on that, I think. So I think those were the few additional topics that I had some notes on to start with, and I'm happy to open it up to other questions.
All right, thanks. I can field the questions this time around. So Jillian raised her hand first. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sorry about any noise you can hear. A couple things. First of all, thank you very much for this presentation, and thanks for speaking up to VDOT for safe streets. We definitely appreciate that Arlington's there at the table, literally, and in the room, making sure that VDOT is being pushed in the right direction, so to speak. So I agree with a ton of what you said. I'm going to focus on some things that I thought were missing and that aren't great. So one thing that surprised me about the designs that VDOT put out was that on the west side of Route 1, where 20th Street comes in, VDOT had a slip lane, just a regular old slip lane, and a really terrible sidewalk configuration where the sidewalk kind of jigged and jagged everywhere. So I was surprised that you guys didn't mention that, since you guys also want to get away from slip lanes. And so I was surprised not to see that. I understand if it's it doesn't seem to me like that would be absolutely necessary because of the existence of alternate routes and the fact that 20th Street is not the main route. You would think that big trucks and everything go to 23rd. But if it's absolutely necessary because of the geometry, you would think that we would still include it in the signal. So it's not a real slip lane. It's still a signalized intersection, and that the sidewalk would continue straight through.
Mm-hmm.
So that's number one. I only had 3 things. Number 2, the cycle track. So having a cycle track is, I think, really important, not just for people biking. I don't know if you were on earlier where I did the whole spiel about when people have a dedicated place to bike, that makes it easier on the drivers and less confusing for drivers, but it's also better for pedestrians, because when people on wheels don't feel safe, they ride on the sidewalk, and no one wants that, right? And so what I'm looking at in these cross sections, I'm not completely clear that there's enough separation between the walking and the biking to keep people apart, to keep people walking out of the cycle track so that the cycle track stays enticing for the people biking, right? And to reduce that conflict. And then also, when you're biking, sometimes you need to stop. You're biking with a kid who needs a drink, or you have a flat tire, or this is the store you're going to. And so I think it's important on these very long Route 1 blocks that any separated cycle track have breaks where you can get off the cycle track for whatever reason you need to stop, park, or do your thing. And then finally, the 2 rows of trees, I think that's great in theory, but I'm not sure. I'm personally not convinced that that's more valuable in this space than a widened sidewalk. I think you're right. It's important to have trees there to make it feel more condensed, to reduce speeds. But 2 rows of trees in the middle, I'm not sure how that's better than 1 row of tree in the middle. And yeah, I think giving that space to people walking and rolling and making sure they're separate and there's less conflict, I think, is more important personally. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Kenny, do you want to go next?
Yeah, that'd be great. My questions are a lot more regular old questions. Will the landscape area in between like the rolling and the street, is that going to have like overhead utility, like power lines and such?
Not overhead utilities, but often those landscape areas do also serve that function of providing space for underground utilities. There's a little more flexibility once you put them underground. They don't have to be just in that space. And with the landscape zones, one thing we have recommended is that as much as possible, they be continuous, because unless you really have a long tree soil panel, that's another thing that contributes to the ability for large mature trees to grow. When they're all segmented into individual kind of small tree pits, they're usually like 5 feet by 8 feet or so. You really only get trees of a certain size. They don't tend to live a very long life, and then they're constantly being replaced, and you never really get that shade benefit that you see along really beautiful green corridors. So those are things we're considering, is how can we maximize that space there.
Then my other question, because I only have two, for the roll section, are each side going to be like two-way, or is it going to be like you have to go all the way across the street to go a direction?
Yeah, that's a great question. We specifically intend for these to be one way. That's our recommendation to VDOT. In their streetscape options, they included one option that had a two-way cycle track. There are benefits to two-way cycle track if you are trying to, utilize that side of the street. It can put you closer to your final destination, but having a two-way cycle track creates a whole list of other operational and safety concerns. And that was kind of part of the reason we recommended the one way on each side. It becomes much harder at intersections to create that predictability between drivers and cyclists seeing each other and knowing which way to look. So especially with left turners coming, say, off a street, they're usually not looking over their left shoulder for someone coming, the wrong way, which it wouldn't be the wrong way, but it's just not what people are used to looking for. And then when it's happening at speed, decisions are made really quickly, and that can lead to crashes. So that's a situation we wanted to just avoid altogether. So it does mean that, if you're cycling along Route 1, you may need to cross the street to get to your final space, but that's also why we're considering this as part of the larger Crystal City, Pentagon City bike network, so that ideally there will be a facility on each street, so you can get to that final destination and still have a bike facility.
Thank you. Pam?
Hi, Allison, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
And thank you for actually reading through the long memo that Dana and I sent you. We basically had 3 areas and lots of other things that I guess you're working on. The first one was, what is actually your role? And you talked about that. And okay, so we have an example. You did this memo, you did this amazing row description that is infinitely better than what VDOT did. First, but what are the chances that VDOT is actually going to follow that? You just keep negotiating until you reach consensus, or how does this work?
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. I think the best way to describe our comments is they're kind of a snapshot of an ongoing conversation. We did kind of, at this point in the study, we reached a point where we felt like we needed to provide some direct guidance and direct recommendations, which is what these comments are intended to be. But they are part of this very long, ongoing conversation. And it is a back and forth, it's iterative. And I would say, based on where we are and where we started phase 2, I think VDOT has been listening and has been considering what they've heard both from staff, but also from the community. I think the letters, the meetings that they've received and had with the various stakeholder groups, including the BAC and PAC, have been influential. And I think we've seen that in things like the 25-mile-per-hour design speed when they were initially considering a 30-mile-per-hour design speed. and in their consideration of streetscape elements that I don't know that they usually put on the table as options. So I think that that's promising. It is a negotiation. We don't know 100% that they are going to be able to accommodate everything that we've asked for. And at that point, we will have to look at trade-offs. But we think that, based on our adopted plans, our adopted policies, and the county standards where we have many, many streets where we have applied these design principles and they've worked well and they're recent, that we have some good precedent to point to show that, this is possible.
Thank you. My other two quick issues was the importance of having a TDM plan. And as you may know, at the backpack meeting, we had actually asked them to provide the numbers of the vehicles per day that they gathered, and the numbers were nowhere close to the 30% reduction that they said. So, our feeling is, okay, we really need a TDM program now. It's got to be this massive regional thing, and I hope that you keep pushing for that as well. The final area is 18th Street, and 18th Street, for those of us who live in the area, is everything. And we really need it fixed right. I personally am a strong believer in barn stance, if it can work out. If you can't do a barn stance, leave it elevated, please. One thing that we had proposed, and when Livability met with you in December, we suggested making 18th Street 3 lanes wide rather than 4 to 5 lanes wide, like a lot of East Street has done. And that could actually help you create the protected bike lanes. And we still really want the Dutch underpass because we still feel that the actually crossing at grade currently is still going to be really dangerous. So we hope that you are still pushing for those things as well, giving them serious consideration. And that's it for now. Anyway, I wish you luck, and I wish us luck on this.
All right. Thanks, Pam.
Thank you, Pam. Tom?
Yeah, hi. I'm delighted to see the 12-foot median in the center of the street. I think that's key to getting a true canopy of trees of shade over the entire street section. I've seen it happen. It's common on the West Side Highway in New York, and they haven't been in place. Those trees haven't been in place all that long, and yet the canopy exists in many places. But one of the things that's very interesting about the West Side Highway is that it has great sidewalks on both sides, and the tree canopy and the medians. It has raised medians, by the way, and I don't know if that is advantageous for the propagation of trees, but it certainly is advantageous for reducing the perceived street width for the traffic lanes on either side. The other thing that's really interesting is you wonder how you're going to slow cars down entering this controlled zone. And it is a question of control. As I witnessed it, I witnessed it when it was the West Side Highway had much longer intervals between signals. And I don't know exactly what formula they're using to slow it down, but it is amazing. You have the Henry Hudson Turnpike, which is an incredible raceway that comes down from northern Manhattan. It comes down a hill into it. Suddenly at 60th Street, it stops, and sanity prevails from there on. They've done something in the last couple of years that has, I think that's the time period, but it's relatively recent, where they have, honestly, they've made it so that there's no advantage in speeding. Mm-hmm. There just is no advantage. And it has made everyone much more comfortable, including, and including pedestrians that cross 8 to 12 lanes in 35 seconds. They have the advantage of having a protection of the middle of the median, but very seldom do they do that. I can't believe I sat there counting 35 seconds light. That's the light change, and they're not moving Broadway kind of crowds, but the discipline is very good, and it's just it is a very quick crossing. I'm surprised. It'd be good to get data on how they achieve this and what their records are about it. But it works incredibly well. Let's see. The other thing is in Broadway, where this exists, those medians, which are I'd say they're at least 2 feet high, and they probably get to be 3 feet in the crowning of it. I mean, they're very good, but at the ends, in the middle of the street, they're actually parks. They have a semicircular wall that creates a bench. Is the width of that? It's probably 14 feet, and it's a park. People hang out there, and it adds to that multi-use and thing that's very important for calming things down. Anyway, there are both Broadway and the West Side Highway have very encouraging lessons for how this works, and it works to everyone's advantage.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and thank you for sharing those examples. We've been looking as staff, but also to share along with VDOT other places around the country that have done this, both from the perspective of bringing elevated highways to grade and how that has worked successfully. But also these examples of where you have quite a bit of traffic and you also have really high ped volumes, and it's able to work. And I think West Side Highway is a great example. We've looked at Park Avenue as well. I worked in New York City before coming to Arlington, so that's an area I look to often. But we've looked all over the country as well. Milwaukee, looked at the Embarcadero. So that's what's great about this is, we're not the first area to do this. We definitely won't be the last. And I think we're part of a nationwide trend to try to eliminate these barriers between neighborhoods, and create streets that can still carry a decent amount of traffic, but that are calmed and humanized in a way that serves everyone better.
The West Side Highway does protect the bicycles going along the river. There is a separate lane there. But that's the only freeway for bikes in New York City. Along the river edges, and so it's very useful to have that separation, especially where your pedestrian numbers are not that high. And I'm wondering if that's the situation here, whether the pedestrian numbers certainly won't be as high as Broadway or something. But that it is possible that's a good trade if your pedestrian numbers are low. Anyway, thank you. Excellent, great presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, but raise that median, right? Raise the median. Really needs it.
All right, so I am looking at the time. We're at 46, and so this is great. Let's continue with questions, but just wanted to note the time as people prepare the number of questions and the verboseness of the responses and things. But I think we can get to everyone, and we might be even have a little time to play a cleanup round with the questions asked in chat. Great. So Eric Goldstein.
Thanks, and thanks for the presentation. So I know we've got the future of outdoor dining study going on right now, but I noticed that there's no space for street cafes or anything, any street sidewalk use other than walking and biking. And right now, I think our cafe guidelines say you can have street cafes in the right of way as long as we leave 6 foot clear. I assume the plan is not to allow street cafes to narrow this down to 6 foot clear, but what is the plan for that?
Yeah, I think we've talked a little bit about this, and I think part of it comes down to the expected uses along Route 1. With the way that Crystal City has been planned, Route 1 has never been really intended to be that main commercial corridor. Of course, Crystal Drive, Eads, other streets are serving that purpose where you're going to have more of that kind of spillover activity, wider sidewalk cafes. And with Route 1, we do want to make sure that we are maintaining that clear width, that it remains a true clear width. That's not to say that I think isolated sidewalk cafes, might be possible. I think it would just have to be decided on a case-by-case basis by site plan, as to, outside of that right of way, what additional space may the developer be able to provide adjacent, to effectively provide that little bit more sidewalk space for the sidewalk cafe. The 2 foot shy zone could overlap that, so that's an area that could be essentially takes a little bit of pressure off the adjacent development where there could be a compromise, but we do want to make sure that it's not encroaching on that 8 feet. And this is something I can bring back to CPHD as well. I think they have a lot more information and thoughts about that, but I think that's a good question.
Yeah, so I'll just say real quick that obviously we haven't planned for that type of development along Route 1 because we didn't plan for Route 1 being at grade, so I would not. So I really think this is something we need to plan for in advance while we're making our plans and not try to shoehorn in after, because I really do think if we build this urban corridor that we're trying to build, people are going to want street cafes there, and we need to build the space into the right of way somewhere to have that happen. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Chris, Scott?
Yeah, I'll try and be super quick because I basically just want to say props to all the staff that were involved in this letter. It was a breath of fresh air to read all 18 pages of it. I think it's probably 90% aligned with the People Before Cars Coalition letter and maybe 95% aligned with SUSMA's letter. And I think it's really great to have our business interests and advocacy interests and the jurisdictional government all kind of pointing the same direction at VDOT to try and get them to really come to a good place here. And I think if we can really get them to move on in a good way on this 25-mile-an-hour design speed, where we actually have curb radii that makes sense for 25 miles an hour and lane widths that make sense for 25 miles an hour and all-ped scramble at 18th Street and all of these other things that we're talking about, it's not going to look like any other VDOT road you've ever seen ever anywhere. So props on that. And we can quibble on, 20th Street, slip lanes, and we can get into details on other bits about 18th Street, but it's just really amazing and fantastic to see that alignment. And I commend staff on one of the best feedback letters I've seen come out of staff. So bravo.
Thanks, Chris.
Noreen?
Yeah, I'll be quick. I just wanted to say I was glad to see the double rows of trees put in, and I support that. Arlington has lost a lot of tree canopy, and especially in South Arlington. South Arlington, most of it is becoming like a heat island now. And so I know there's an effort to try to replace as much canopy as possible. And those trees will provide shade and cool to the there's a lot of pavement down there, so needs to be shaded, and they'll also mitigate a lot of the stormwater runoff and so forth. So I think it's a good idea to put as many trees as possible along there, and I think it's a good idea. So thanks.
Thank you.
Cynthia?
Hey, thank you, Allison. So my question is, how many seconds of pedestrian cycle do you consider too many, at which point you feel we need to ditch the idea of having a barn stance? At what point does the barn stance become infeasible? Some of us have been going around Arlington and neighboring jurisdictions and timing the intersections, and we've been studying the maps, and we're getting increasingly worried about the cycle time. And as we all know, a longer cycle is dangerous. Like on Leesburg Pike, it's about 3 minutes cycle where I cross multiple times a day, and cars are cutting through the red like everywhere all the time because they don't want to wait 3 minutes, nor do I, but I'm on a bike, so I wait longer than that. But so my question is sort of, what is that point at which you say barn stance won't work? And if you say that, are you pushing VDOT to give us an underpass? The current underpass is beautiful. It feels so comfortable. I would be happy for my girls to be under there at any hour. It's better than most of our underpasses in Arlington. So sort of where does that leave us?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. We don't have like a threshold number or a cutoff. It's more about, as I understand it, and this is talking with our traffic engineers, is that it's more about how the entire signal network works together. So there's kind of two issues. So I'll start with that one. We do, with this corridor, we want VDOT to pursue a signal timing progression that encourages that 25 miles an hour so that, you know, the light turns green where you are. When you're driving, you pull forward, the next light doesn't turn green faster than that 25 mile per hour speed. So you're basically, if you speed to the next light, you're basically punished for it because you just have to slam on your brakes and wait at the red. So it encourages that consistent driving behavior. In order to do that, all of the signals have to be on the same cycle length, and they have to have, you know, a very specific phasing. And so by having an all PED phase here, we just need to understand from VDOT, how is that going to work with the other adjacent intersections? There is some kind of unique time available at this intersection because it doesn't have the left turns off of Route 1 the way that the other intersections do. So that time that would have gone to additional green time to allow permissive left turns, or the protected left turn time with the green arrow, that isn't happening at 18th. So there's possibility there, but we haven't seen how that is all going to work together. And so we want more information on that. Because if you have one light that's out of sync with the others, the progression isn't going to work. It's also going to create backups on the side streets, which can lead to intersection blocking, which then blocks our other bike facilities. You know, so it all becomes a snowballing issue. And then from the pedestrian side, again, there's no hard and fast rule as to, you know, this cycle length is too long, but we do know that the longer that cycle lengths get, the more you tend to see non-compliance, and you start to have more enforcement issues. And so there's just a tension there. And so, I mean, at this point, it's really, we want VDOT to provide a few different scenarios of how this could work, demonstrate to us that it can work, that there will be sufficient time for people to comfortably cross the street. They're not going to get caught in the middle. You know, I think it's just kind of getting through more of those details from them. So.
Great. Dana, I'm glad you raised your hand because I was looking through and you asked a lot of really good questions in the chat that haven't been touched on yet. So go ahead.
Yeah, can you talk about the enforcement plan? You know, VDOT basically said Arlington will figure this out. You know, what do the police say? You know, have you engaged the police? You know, there doesn't seem to be any evidence that, you know, that they participated in the reviews. You know, because, you know, without enforcement, it's just going to be the Wild West again.
Yeah.
A different version of the Wild West.
Yeah, and I think, enforcement with any of our, especially the more major corridors, is always important. And enforcement here will be wrapped into, our ongoing Vision Zero coordination that we have with ACPD. So, even before we're into detailed design, we're going to be talking with them. At this point, since we're still figuring out with VDOT what those operations will look like. It's a little bit premature, but this is something that I can mention to Christine Baker and to the Vision Zero team to bring up just in their coordination meetings with ACPD, just to have it on their radar. And then as we are getting into design and starting to look at those questions of how many seconds does each signal have, and what is the exact phasing and all of that, I think having their involvement, having their awareness will be really important. And then, of course, having some extra attention, post-construction here will be particularly helpful because it'll be a brand new condition for everybody.
All right, great. Seeing no more questions. Thank you so much for joining us, Allison. And sorry, Pam.
Real fast. One of the reasons why we're supporting the reduction in lanes on 18th is that's going to reduce the crossing distance too. So that's going to give you a little bit more time. So please push for this. Thank you. And thank you again for your presentation and all your hard work.
Yeah. Yeah, seconded. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We do have just 2 quick minutes left, and we'll do the budget discussion separately as PAC and BAC over emails. So we'll skip that. But final remaining item on the agenda is just if there is any PAC BAC business. I just have one quick update for the PAC. Do you have anything, Cynthia? For the BAC, you can go first.
I just wanted to say regarding the budget, please, if people have budget priorities, send them to Lizzie for the PAC and to me for the BAC, because we have a meeting this Tuesday with Mark Schwartz, and we will have the opportunity to give our committee priorities for the budget. So let's do it over email. That's great. But this is like sooner rather than later.
That's a really good point, Cynthia. Yes, there's more of a specific deadline than there usually is on this. Great. Eric, I saw your hand first.
Yeah, 2 things. One, I guess I said, I think the budget's important enough. I'm certainly willing to stick around later to talk about it if you want us to, but that's up to you whether you want to do it over email. And then 2, I think at least my membership on the PAC has expired. I don't know where I think the terms all ended at December 31st. Are we still members? Is that something anyone's been talking about?
David.
I will check on that. I think they run through next year, but
yeah.
You're usually right, Eric. So I will check on that. And if I have to follow up, I will do that with the manager's office.
Right.
So Pam, we might not have a quorum.
Illegitimate.
Yeah. Well, I think we still have a quorum. Yeah, I just wanted approval of the minutes. Vote again.
All right, well, let's approve the minutes going under the assumption that everyone who is a member is still a member, and therefore we have quorum. So I believe our last minutes were a joint BAC-PAC meeting. So a little unclear exactly who should be voting on this, but we'll just we'll just proceed. Yeah. So do I hear a motion to approve that? The minutes from the December joint BAC-PAC meeting? Oh, I guess, sorry, I forgot the point. Were there any comment, any modifications anyone had before we approve that they had not previously let Pam know about? David has a raised hand.
I have a raised hand to Eric's point. You're right. Everybody's terms expired December 31st. So We need to swear in a new Congress.
Okay.
I hope we can do it more easily.
I will act on that right away tomorrow.
I think we can still meet and approve the minutes, though.
You can still vote on the December meeting minutes.
Okay, I didn't hear
Okay.
any. Yeah.
Okay, not hearing any modifications, we will proceed with our potentially illegitimate vote. So I move to approve the minutes. Any seconds?
Second.
Anyone objecting to approving the minutes from last meeting?
No objection, just huge thanks to Pam for writing those up. That's an enormous job. So really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. It makes me focus.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pam.
Well, thank you.
The minutes are approved. So we'll,
thank you.
Yeah, I think we're good there. Okay, so I think this can be the official end of the meeting if people need to drop. I did hear at least one interest in discussing the budget. I would be happy to stick around. This is probably just for BAC members who are interested in discussing the budget. So if you're not a member of the BAC, thank you for joining us. You're welcome to stick around as well. And if you also have other things and you are a member, that's also totally fine. Thank you for joining us. But I think if you can stick around.
Yeah. And I hope David and Lynn can stay on as well, because I have some questions about what they think are the appropriate priorities, since it sounds like the budget is going to have a lot of constraints this year.
I can go another 10 or 15 minutes. Yes.
Okay, that'll be sufficient.
Okay, great. So we have a lot of folks, so I do want to be respectful of people's time. So let's kind of quickly kicking off. I guess Pam, do you want to speak more to I noticed you sent the email around saying it was like a little bit more constrained budget. I didn't necessarily get that from the PowerPoint presentation that you shared. So maybe unclear how much we should take that into account. I kind of just wanted to hear your thoughts there.
And again, I would like staff's opinion on that. My sense of it was that, yes, there is money, but because expenses for everything has gone up, we're actually potentially in the red. Did I read that wrong? At least what I heard, they were talking about cuts. And my sense is it's going to be difficult to push for anything new, but maybe I don't have the right sense of what's going on.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like whether we should be pushing for new things or like advocating for defense of things.
I guess I got the same sort of tone as we hear every year. I know Mark likes the joke that it's an average budget year, worse than last year, but better than next year. So I think probably the same sort of tone as we've dealt with in the past of there'll probably be some cuts, but there'll also be some areas and money around to put at things that are true priorities for the community.
That sounds reasonable to me. And our usual priorities are Vision Zero, complete streets, street lights.
Crossing guards.
What?
Crossing guards.
Crossing guards. Lizzie, are you still on the Complete Streets Commission?
I am, yes.
Yeah, my sense is they're always really struggling to do more than a couple projects at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way that more money would help them? I mean, do they need more staff?
Yeah, so I actually have two points from our last commission meeting to kind of bring up. So they have a pot of money and they are having a hard time spending all of it.
Ooh.
So one of the big reasons is staffing concerns around planners. I guess the planning department is down like 4 or 5 like planners, and they're like the open positions they're trying to hire, but there just like aren't enough people to like assign to do the engineering work for the projects.
Okay.
So I don't know if more money makes that faster. Like hiring people is just hard.
So they have the money to hire people, but the people haven't been hired?
That is my understanding, is that the positions are open but unfilled. And so it's been hard to commit to new projects. So I don't think money necessarily makes a difference there. I think that's kind of a separate issue. The 2 points I did have from the Complete Streets Commission is they're writing a letter. They report to the board, so they're writing it to the board about bringing more engineering in-house. Sorry, not engineering, but the actual construction in-house. One problem they've had is in getting contractors. It's hard for them to do more than a couple projects per year because it's hard to get like on the contractor schedules when you're like competing with Amazon. And the cost estimates are often higher and the timeline's longer than when they are able to like get water, sewer, streets to help. So they have an interest in, instead of spending money on contractors, bringing more services in-house. They've just had better success there. So that's one thing that group is advocating for. And they asked if we wanted to advocate to, they're to the board, so we're to the manager, so we can talk to both. And then the second point from that meeting, actually, no, sorry. That's the only point from the meeting. I have a personal point, but that's from Complete Streets.
Okay. Interesting that you raised that, bringing things in-house. There was a story recently on Streets Blog, about, I forget what town it was, what city it was, where they usually contracted out to get their sidewalks done, but they brought that in-house, and it is more efficient and timely, and they can have more control over what they're doing. So maybe that's a reasonable thing to suggest.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good.
I would definitely support the in-house thing. We recently had an issue where a area with a crosswalk was repaved right by a school bus stop, and the crosswalk was not reinstalled for 2 months, and it was a raised crosswalk. We still don't have the raised thing back, and the entire reason we didn't have a crosswalk for the kids for 2 months was contractors weren't available or something, and the whole reason it's still not raised, contractors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess another point I have, so I think I'm getting lots of plus ones from there. Another point I wanted to bring up, this kind of came from a meeting 3 months ago, when our friends from Water, Sewer, Streets came and spoke to us about all the great things we learned from that sidewalk inventory. And there was the one topic of discussion that I found particularly interesting about, it was the way things used to work, was the way the story was presented about sidewalks that are maintained in commercial corridors, where sidewalk maintenance is, so today the sidewalk maintenance is the responsibility of the bank, the building, the business that's sitting there. But there's no enforcement mechanism today. And I guess how this used to work in the past is the county, when they were notified of a sidewalk that was, bye Chris, a sidewalk that was in disrepair, the county would like basically give the commercial business a bill saying, hey, we'll fix it for you for this price. You can go find contractors and fix it yourself, but like somebody, like it's got to be fixed. And it led to kind of greater compliance than we see today in commercial corridors for like sidewalk maintenance. So there's no, I think Water, Sewer, Streets was saying like there's no budget for doing that today, but that was a big thing when we were talking about sidewalk conditions, right? There's the whole, like all these lines on that chart of that map saying like, well, we can't actually do anything about these because we don't own them. Or we're not responsible for the maintenance. So that's kind of an idea from a previous meeting of if there could be funds to, and I guess changing of the rules about sidewalk maintenance in commercial corridors.
Right. That's important.
I'm going to reflect on something that you all have touched on about bringing things in-house, and I'll note that Elwin popped into the chat the example of Cincinnati, who I think was probably the example you all were talking about. This comes up with bike racks all the time. Bike racks are hard to get installed. The contractors hate doing them. They're expensive to be done. And DC brought the process in-house. They had the staff up to have now city workers do it. I don't know how it's working out in practice, but they went round and round and round trying to do it through contracting, but they geared up to do it in-house. So I'm dipping my toe into that to try to get help from our water, sewer, streets folks to do bike rack installations.
Was it contractors that put, because there's all the new corrals, like there's like hundreds of new bike racks that have been installed. Was that in-house or contractors?
It's contracted out. Henry knows more than I do about that. It's contracted out with the folks who also manage our side of the scooter companies. So the mandate was to provide scooter corrals, and we piggybacked bike parking into the scooter corrals because it's been so hard to do bike racks.
Yes, that's Metro Bike, the contractor. Employing one, Rich Viola, in fact, doing that, but it's sort of a hybrid, if you will.
It is, and they're concentrating on the asphalt part of the streetscape, which is great to colonize that and convert it from dedication to car storage. So it's a very nice arc, but it's taken 10 years to get there.
Okay, I do see some raised hands. Dana, I think yours is first.
Yeah, yeah, the sidewalk process, is an absolute shit show. Because there's no, the county has not thought through how they're actually going to manage the property owners. And rather than reaching out to the civic associations to do inspections or stuff, there's no inspection. So there will be issues that linger, having been told that after having the county was told, for a year or so before the property owner actually gets around to do it. It's kind of an embarrassment, and it's a cost avoidance issue more than legal. They cite a really crappy law that I don't think even covers it. But basically what it does is it allows the county to slough those costs off on the property owners.
So, sorry, but to bring this back to budget question, is there a budget point in this discussion?
I believe when we
had this, to me like Arlington could run that as a program and have that program have whatever costs, and then when it bills the property owners, when it actually has to do it, and it so when there's a sidewalk problem, they send a notice to the property owner saying fix it, and if you don't fix it, you'll be billed. And then they come back, if they actually fix it and they send a bill to the property owner, they just include all the administrative costs of the program. And they could do that, so it's a self-funding program. It shouldn't have a net budget impact. This is the kind of stuff that Mark Schwartz loves. Like, this seems like a no-brainer proposal.
I'd go for it.
Yeah, and apparently this is how it used to work, so it's not like we're proposing a radical idea, but just kind of like a program that was maybe forgotten for a while. And so, yeah, maybe Cynthia or I should find someone who can tell us about this next before Tuesday, so we can speak with confidence. But Eric.
Yeah, so in terms of budget priorities, for me, number one would be everything Vision Zero related. But beyond that, I think I would group 2, 3, and 4 as all enforcement. So I see the sidewalk stuff we're talking about as enforcement, and whether it's a net budget or not, it certainly saves the county a lot of money to be offloading these costs onto the property owner. We need to recognize that there's an administrative cost of doing that, and can't take the good without the bad. But I'd also put in there the enforcement around construction projects and making sure our sidewalks stay clear. That's something I think we've pushed for in the past and still want to see improvements. There just aren't enough inspectors to go around out there and keep our sidewalks open. And then the third enforcement item, I think we need to push the county on. I don't know whether this is really a budget issue, but maybe take the budget as an excuse to bring it up again, is around automated enforcement of speed limits. So I know that's been sitting as something we've been trying to do, at least around, I think it's around school zones for quite a while, and just haven't been able to get our act together in terms of getting them out there. I think it's been in procurement or something for quite a while. So since money can solve all problems, if money can solve that one, we should do so. So Vision Zero, then enforcement, enforcement, enforcement.
I agree. That's great.
Cynthia?
Thank you. So, these all sound good, but since we have David and Henry and Leah in this conversation, maybe you all could tell us like where Arlington actually needs more resources. I mean, these are all important, and I would add to the list more money for signaling, because it seems like whenever we have signaling issues, they're overstretched in that too. Signage, so important. We are having a discussion on the listserv just before the meeting. It would be great to have some signage that's low-hanging fruit, and it's absent in so many places. And then like 4 Mile Run Drive, and I'm a broken record, but the street surrounding Jenny Dean Park, beautiful, glorious magnet of a park, but Arlington does not have the resources to deal with that right now, officially. So where, from an insider perspective, where does Arlington actually need, sort of what should we say? It's all important.
I'm measuring my words. Lizzie said in relation to the Neighborhood Complete Streets program, they have trouble spending the money they have because there's staffing issues and hiring people takes a long time. For what little money I spend, I have similar problems. It's hard to spend money. And oh God, I hate always going back to this well, but here's an example. A lot of what I do is what we do with collecting data, bicycle and pedestrian data. And I wind up doing a lot of it myself. It's peculiar equipment that comes from France via Canada, and I've been doing it a long time, so I know more about it than almost anybody. And there's no network of service people. So the only way we get it serviced is to bring somebody here from Canada. And we've budgeted for that. So now it's an issue of, working with airplane reservations and weather and things like that. So that's one small example, but and here's the downside of bringing things in-house. And I understand what this looks like from a management perspective. If it's a contract, it's external, it's a one-time, or maybe it's an ongoing or several year-long contract. You pay the bill and away they go. If it's staff you've brought in to the county family, they're yours forever with encumbered pay rates and all that. It's a big deal to create new full-time equivalent county staff. So I know peanuts about budgets. I think you all have paid more attention than I have. I'm in a privileged position to not have to pay attention to the budget too much. But Eric, you've got a good handle on it, and people who've been in the meetings with Mr. Schwartz and Pam and new folks, I think there's an open ear to hear what's required. There was I said crossing guards earlier, but wasn't there something last year, even in a tight budget year, wasn't there an increase of funding for some part of the enforcement picture? If not crossing guards, then somebody?
Construction, maybe?
No, it was the traffic safety people in the police department. So
Okay.
it was supposed to be something intermediate between the person who writes meter tickets, but not a full police
Not
officer.
a full officer, right?
And so I don't I haven't heard. I've got no idea if that program even got off the ground. I haven't heard anything about
Well, I
that
think it
outside
was
the budget.
funded, and that was something that the PAC endorsed, right? So I think there was a new increment of funding. So I don't have any magic answer here, but I think that your priorities are listened to and heeded. And yeah, it's always a competition for money. And what you mentioned about the bike racks and Metro Bike, that was great. That got started by fees collected for the shared mobility companies. Their permit fees go into a pot, and they said, gosh, we got a pot of money. What are we going to do with it? Well, create some new parking. And that's working out great. And without requiring county staff. That's a contract that's actually working really well. So I'm going to stop talking. This is certainly not my strong suit. I don't know much about budget. I don't know how to advise you on this one.
I'll just pitch in really quick. I think Vision Zero, definitely. And then one thing, if you're interested in MOTs that we hear a lot of, is the inspector teams, the permitting and inspection office that goes out. And these are people that work all day going from site to site, trying to inspect to make sure private development and construction crews are keeping, sidewalks clear, roadways clear, bike lanes and trails. They're severely understaffed, that inspection team. I'll just throw that out there.
That's a
We
good one
asked
to
for
remind us
that
of.
last year. Did they not listen, or was that not fulfilled?
No,
I
don't believe so.
Well, that's one of Eric's 3 points, right?
And that one's been a long-standing issue. That's the Lydia
Yeah.
Raya and Steve Bridget team.
Right.
They've got a huge workload, and we've heard a lot, but haven't seen a lot from them. I don't know how they're handling those issues.
I would say, even though it was brought up last year and didn't happen, I would still push for it.
Push it again.
This year is, I guess, what I'm saying.
Really
yeah.
important.
I know I'm not technically a part of either commission, but I know that construction for like a lot of homes has gone on and increased in the last year. Is there any way you can get that kind of attention to transportation projects? For example, like getting people thinking that there needs to be more construction, that there needs to be more built for like from other counties and stuff. Yeah, my questions are always very confusing. I don't know what I said.
But thank you.
Kenny, you need to stick around and you'll learn a lot. So do you know how to contact these folks to express interest if you want to come back and maybe join a committee and be more involved? You've been a good participant tonight.
I mean, I was actually gonna say when the meeting almost ended, every event I've gone to so far with the Arlington County, Lizzie has been there. I'm like, I didn't know she was the coordinator of PAC, but I'm honestly just like, should I just get her contact information and find out what the next event is?
Yeah.
Kenny and I met at the Neighborhood Complete Streets Commission.
Yes.
I thought I met you at that one walk on Halloween.
Oh.
Oh.
All right.
I don't remember what I was doing on Halloween. Always good to see you again.
Yeah. Well, just reach out if you're interested in being part of this club, Kenny. Just reach out and we'll find a way to accommodate you.
I got so much with school. I'll focus on that, then I'll join the club.
Very good.
Right.
All right, folks.
Yes, I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, if anyone has any further thoughts or anything, feel free to email either Cynthia or I or both of us. Yeah, and we will let you know how Tuesday goes.
Well, I support Eric's proposal, and I don't know if Eric and Lizzie and Cynthia, if you want to write something up in the next couple of days and send it around, or just go for it, or what?
To be honest, I was just kind of going to go for it, and then depending on how it went, like if we felt like there might be a lot of people in the room, maybe we don't get to all of our things, or like the
Right.
event is like slightly different than we thought, then
Right.
committing to a letter.
Okay, that sounds good.
I don't know. So
So
you can make a different decision.
Yeah, we would probably want to do a letter at some point. And one of the things to find out is exactly what the deadline is for the letter.
Mhm. Yeah, 'cause I think we missed it last year. At least the PAC did. So
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
All right,
Thanks
folks.
everyone.
I'm going to
Thank you.
stop recording and stop
Yeah,
transcripting.
don't forget to capture the chat and everything and send it to me. And thank you, everybody. And
So now we can say what we really think. Now that the recording stopped. Is that what you're saying?
I'm still going.
I haven't hit the button yet.
Ah.
It's still going.
All right, I'm gonna go.
Okay.
Bye, friends.
Night.
Thank you all.
Thanks, sir.